This morning I've got a story for you guys about the time that I lived in a trailer park. But first, release the Kraken! So that's 12 eggs for today. Not bad. So I was sitting on the T, which is the Boston word for metro or subway, and I was going to class up in Medford, Massachusetts, and I remember thinking to myself, am I crazy for actually doing this? I was 22 years old, living in Boston, and I was just about to graduate from college. I had my entire life in front of me. I could just stay in Boston and try to find work and hang out with my friends. I could go out to LA and try to couch surf and try to find some sort of meaningful work out there. I could move to New York. You know, there were all sorts of different opportunities open to me and things I could have gone for. But in spite of all of those things, I decided to take a job that I had right in Hartford, Connecticut. Now, I grew up just outside of Hartford. So if you want to talk about where I'm from and where did I originate from, you know, central Connecticut is pretty much the place to point to. Part of me wonders now, looking back on that decision nearly 20 years later, was I sort of afraid to take a risk and venture too far out from my comfort zone? The answer could quite possibly be yes. But whatever, that's water under the bridge and that's in the past. So I had this job lined up in the Hartford area, and I needed to find a place to stay. I didn't want to move in with my mom. I didn't want to move in with my dad. I needed to live separately and continue the trajectory I'd been on ever since I left the house at 18. And so I was trying to figure out some sort of housing situation. Now, my buddy Brian, who was one of my closest friends throughout all of high school, is still one of my closest friends today. He's always been kind of a nonconformist. And so one of the things he did at the age of 22 is he bought a trailer. You know, like a trailer in a trailer park. The trailer and the trailer park were right in central Connecticut. And I know some of you guys might be thinking, what? A trailer park in Connecticut? That sounds like an oxymoron. But believe me, even in central Connecticut, there is a need for low-income housing. I was kind of fascinated by the trailer park. I'd always grown up in, you know, sort of nicer suburb-ish areas, and I definitely came from more of an upper middle class background. So it's fair to say I've kind of had a sheltered existence and hadn't quite seen some things. So I was fascinated with the trailer park, and after talking it over with Brian for a little bit, we decided, sure, it'd be a great idea for me to move into the trailer with him and his girlfriend. And so for $150 a month, I had found my own place, in my first place as a true college graduated adult. Yes, a rented room in a trailer. Now, moving into the trailer park was definitely different from me, but there was a lot of curiosity I had about the people and the surroundings and even just the visual aesthetic of these uniform rows of trailers that had all sorts of interesting decorations and accessories that made them unique and made them each distinct. And because of that fascination, I think that's what initially got me started to whip out my video camera, start filming and capturing what was going on around me. Much like I do with a lot of other things in my life.
The back wheel's definitely gonna make it. But
oh yeah, it's gonna land right there, man. I'm gonna slide in a little bit. Cause I know that wheel's landing right here on this mud patch. Mike, you better go like a man, I'm telling you. He kills my ribs and breaks my ribs, man, I'm gonna die.
I'm gonna die.
Hey, he's gonna take you out. Look out. Go, Mike, go!
And it started to get to be this pattern where I would come home from work every day, pull out my video camera, go hang out on my stoop, and I would meet the residents of the trailer park.
Hey, look at that! Hey, come here! Hurry up! That girl fall over! Hurry up! Bring that binocular!
You know, there were always people out front having beers and smoking cigarettes. There were always kids playing or going crazy.
I'll pay you back for
I got an idea. Get my bike! Best jump. His best jump was in front of his mother's house. I swear to God, we had 4.
And it was kind of this interesting mix of characters that were there and folks that I met. Some of them were absolutely insane and kind of dastardly. Some of them were kind of nice. A fair amount of them were both insane and nice. But it led to this difference that was so different than what I was used to as a kid growing up in suburbia. So I guess the reason I'm going into this whole story with you guys is last week I was on a radio show hosted by a guy by the name of Colin McEnroe. It's actually a Connecticut-based radio show on the Connecticut NPR station.
And you're listening to The Delicious Dish on National Public Radio.
And so I was having a conversation with Colin about trailer parks.
This time in a South Windsor mobile home park is not something that you would willingly dispense with from your life, that it's something you're glad you lived through?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that experience there taught me a lot about people and being able to sort of understand where people are coming from. And yeah, that would be something I wouldn't want to trade for the world.
At one point in the radio show, Colin had asked me, do I think it's unfair, some of the stereotypes? And I gotta say I do. Because while even though I ended up moving to the trailer park because I thought it was fascinating and weird, and a lot of the things that sort of seemed to be living up to the stereotype on the surface were the things that drew me in and attracted me to it, as I got in there and started living there myself, I recognized that it's hard for people in trailer parks because there's this broader stigma you have to contend with. And based on my own experience, some of those trailer trash type of stereotypes, are rooted in certain things, but a lot of it is wildly unfair and dismissive of a whole group of people who just happen to live somewhere because it's cheap and affordable. Like a broke college student with a crazy amount of student debt. As a single guy who was 22, I remember talking to one young lady, just starting to get to know her, and was on a date, and she asked where I lived, and when I explained that I lived in a trailer park, the absolute look of shock and revulsion on her face was...
It looked like this!
Like, I was thinking I was better than that, and I could rise above the social stigma and stink that came with trailer parks. But in fact, here I was actually being one of those trailer people. And it was actually that event distinctly that ultimately made me realize how painful and crippling and unfair a lot of stereotypes are. And part of that is there's just a lot of crappy things that we as a society cast down on people who live in trailer parks.
And then he took the tire off the front, man, and he's running around with a steel rim. I said, don't even think about it.
With a few bad apples spoiling it for the whole darn bunch. But then when I think about it even more broadly, and I think about other stereotypes that our society has, how unfair they can be for the people who fall into the mold of that stereotype. And I know I shouldn't probably feel too good about the fact that it took me 22 years on this earth to ultimately come to a revelation like that, but it was actually living in the trailer park that made me realize just how painful and horrible stereotypes can be for a person. And as I've tried to push forward in life over the years, I've realized that I really need to try to rise above some of that stuff, even if there is this instinctual prejudgment based on a certain characteristic or two. So that is what I have learned by living in trailer parks. I hope you guys think about this one and don't just apply it to people who live in trailer parks, but also know that that goes for a number of other types of people out there who deserve better than some sort of shorthand label. They deserve to be appreciated as people unto themselves, and they deserve to be given the benefit of the doubt. Now please excuse me as I get off my high horse, as I have some ducks I have to go wrangle. Come on! Back around. Go back around. Come on. Get back in here.